problems, but this is a 2013 computer, and I won't be able to do another upgrade after this.
Mine's a 2001, not 2001, a 2010 MacBook Pro. So it's like an old Chevy at this point. Nothing is compatible with it. So, but I'm
Yeah,
holding on.
I will say the new MacBook Pros are kind of cool.
I just got a new MacBook Air, and I can say it's really cool. It is. It's got some fun stuff.
Hey,
MJ,
John.
I'm gonna want to ask you at another time, MJ, offline, why you went with the Air as opposed to the Pro for your recent purchase.
I can tell you very quickly, because when I bought the Air, the new Pro hadn't come out yet, and all the reviews said the Air was better than the Pro. But now the Pro is probably better. So, it was timing. Very quick answer. Nothing else but timing.
They get you, don't they?
Yes.
The overlords at Apple.
Yep.
It looks like we're live on YouTube. We have
Lucy, John,
a lot of info to share.
How you guys doing
today? So to get the ball rolling, welcome everyone. Welcome back.
Let's nerd.
Everyone that is here for the first time and everyone who's been with us from the beginning, welcome back. We're happy to have you all. We are almost at celebrating 60. I was going to say 60 years old, but 60 episodes long. We're almost 60 episodes old. We are hitting milestones, which we didn't think we were going to hit this year, but it's been a wonderful journey, and we have enjoyed expanding on the conversation and teaching tour management. Today, we'll be discussing Settlement 2.0. We have some wonderful special guest panelists that are going to break it all down for us today. I'm going to pass the ball over to MJ, and she will introduce our guest, and we will get the conversation going. So passing it over to you, MJ.
So as Mark said, we are doing Settlement 2.0 today, and we've already done 2 sessions on settlement and talked about, the nuts and bolts. We've talked about how to actually do a settlement. But we're not going to talk about just putting numbers in spreadsheets today in our deep dive into settlement. In order to truly understand settlement, you need to understand what goes into the deal and why we need to know this. So we have 3 amazing guests today who are going to discuss do the deep dive. We have Stuart Ross, who you've met before on our earlier sessions. We have John Pleeter, VP of Concerts at ICM Partners, and Lucy Lawler-Freese, owner of Rival Entertainment in Atlanta and the talent buyer for the amazing Fox Theater there. So fabulous Fox Theater. Fabulous. So let's start with introductions. Stuart, I know we've had you on before, but give us a brief for those of our students who haven't watched yet or met you. Give us a brief introduction.
Hi, my name's Stuart Ross. I started in this business as a roadie in the 1970s and became a sound man and figured out I wasn't very good at mixing. So I became a tour manager and morphed into tour accountant. And one of the acts I was a tour accountant for, Jane's Addiction, morphed into a festival called Lollapalooza, which is a 2-hour story in itself. And so I was one of the producers in Lollapalooza from the tour from 1991 to 1997. And since then, I've been an agent and a manager and a tour accountant, and I kind of find a place that is appropriate for me.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Right now, I'm mostly a manager.
And we've talked about mentors before, but I wanted to try something different for intros, and give us one mentor and why.
Oh boy. I'll try and give you one that might resonate. Peter Grosslight. Peter Grosslight was the head of William Morris. And when we were doing Lollapalooza, and William Morris was a significant partner, it was me and Peter sitting in his office all day trying to figure out what the business structure for this thing is going to be, because nobody had ever done it before. And the amount I learned just listening to him on the phone can't be overstated. I mean, I've had other mentors, you know, if you wanted to go way back, Willard Alexander, Doug McNeil, Bill Siddons, there's a bunch of people, but I would say Grosslight.
Cool. And Lucy, tell us a little bit about yourself. I can't speak right today. Yourselves.
So my name is Lucy Lawler-Freese. I am a partner in a company called Rival Entertainment. We're an independent promoter in Atlanta. We've been in business 15 years now. And I'm also director of programming for the Fox Theater. And that's a pretty fabulous building if you haven't been there. I started in 1996 as a runner during the Olympics. And then I quickly started working in the office of Concert Southern Promotions, which at the time was an independent promoter. Alex Cooley and Peter Conlon ran the business. It evolved into SFX, Clear Channel, Live Nation, but I quickly became a talent buyer within probably 6 months of working for them. So I think my first venue was the Cotton Club, and I started booking that in 1997. So 24 years in this business now.
And I'll ask you about the same question. Who were your mentors and why?
Alex Cooley was the Bill Graham of Atlanta, and he was my first teacher. He was a gentle giant and patient and kind, and I was 20 years old, 21 years old, and he taught me the deal. And from then, you know, no one has compared to him, I guess, but most recently, I think Mark Geiger sort of was a mentor.
Yeah. He was one of the first agents I worked with, and wow, he's just so great at just teaching you the ropes.
Right. Well, you know, when I started Rival, he supported me from day one, and Mueller, and sold me Beastie Boys and Pixies, and that sort of kicked off Rival Entertainment. So
that's awesome. John, let's hear from you. Introduce yourself to our students.
Sure. Well, glad to be here, and excited for some fun conversation today. So, you know, I've been doing this for a long time. I started out as a trainee back at a company called Triad, which was then purchased by William Morris. And then from there, spent some time at CAA, Artist Direct, the agency group, and I've been at ICM for going on 9 years. Hard to believe, but so, you know, I've been an agent my whole career, with the exception of my college days where I was actually a promoter, production manager at the University of Colorado. I was managing local bands, including, you know, some that have gone on to, pretty significant success now. But, you know, similar to Stuart, I've done many things. And the lane that I've been in, you know, has been the agency lane for the past few decades. And, you know, it's the live end of things has really been my passion. You know, it's, you know, that's where I first, you know, got my first set of real goosebumps at the age of 12. And, you know, I got the bug then, and it's still with me. So that's why I'm here.
And your mentors?
My mentors, you know, I really have three mentors. You know, my first boss as a young green trainee was Jeff Frasco, who's now at CAA. You know, probably the best agent in the business as far as fighting for his clients. I learned all of that from him. He goes to the mat for every single one of his clients, no matter how big, how small, and loyalty I learned from Jeff. So He's my mentor, a friend, and then similar to Lucy and that's Muller and Geiger. Don and Mark, taught me so many things. I mean, we can go on for 2 hours just on those guys on this call. But those guys taught me a whole other set of skills that I still use to this day, and I still admire the work that they do, both as people and as professionals. I'm consistently blown away by both of them. So those are my three.
Awesome. And I'm going to hand off actually to 5-1 to get us started into the meat of this conversation.
I am so excited for this one today because I worked with Lucy years and years ago. So she taught me a lot, some of the first settlement stuff. Love Stuart and John. I'm really looking forward to hearing from you. So I'll start with Stuart. So Stuart, can you take us through the history of how we got to the type of show deals that we see in settlements these days?
Okay, so Lucy, John, feel free to jump in at any time. But right now, the shows we do are settled at 85-15, 80-20. There's promoter profit deals. There's variations on things. But that really wasn't always the way deals were structured. Deals were structured a lot differently years ago, 60-40s, 70-30s. It's only when the concert business exploded that deals became anywhere from 85-15s to, we've all heard about deals that were over 100% of the gross, but we're not going to get into that because those are essentially outliers. So originally, it wasn't AEG and Live Nation. There were individual promoters who each owned their own markets. And nobody ever kind of encroached into their markets because the simplest way, this wasn't the mafia, you just weren't going to be able to buy talent. I have a little PowerPoint I want to share. So I'm going to do a share screen here, and here we go. Is that coming up? You guys can see that?
Yep.
Okay, yep. So I'm talking about 1970. And, you can go back 5 years more, but the promoters before 1970 were very old school. A lot of them were ex-boxing promoters or radio station people. So I'm really talking about the meat of the industry. So if we look at it, New York was Ron Delsner, later Delsner Slater. LA was Avalon Attractions, Boston, Don Law, San Francisco, the famous Bill Graham, Atlanta, Concert Southern, New Jersey was Metropolitan, Seattle. I struggled a little bit with this. John, Lucy, help me. I remember it as Ivy Bauer. Am I missing somebody in there for Seattle?
I think you're right, Stu.
Okay. DC and Florida were Cellar Door, the famous Jack Boyle. Buffalo was Harvey Weinstein. Yes, that Harvey Weinstein. Before Harvey Weinstein was a film producer, and I can't say before he was, a lecher, because he might have been one back then. He had a company called Harvey and Corky, and they were the Buffalo concert promoters. Then he got out, and now we know what happened to him. Phoenix, Evening Star, Danny Zalisco. Philly was Electric Factory. Indianapolis was Sunshine. Portland was Dave Lycan. What was the name of Dave's company? You guys remember?
Double T.
That's it, Double T. Pittsburgh, DeCesar Engler. Texas was Louis Messina, which was, I think it was called Pace back then.
I think so.
New Orleans, yeah. Don Fox. Chicago Jam. Denver, Barry Fayette Fayline. Montreal, Donald K. Donald. Toronto, CPI. Vancouver, Periscope. Cleveland was Belkin. Detroit Brass Ring, Contemporary in St. Louis, CC, which is Cecil Corbett. Remember him? Oh man, I love Cecil. Mid-Atlantic, and then Mid-South, which was kind of the Memphis area, Bob Kelly. Now, the folks that I have in green are the folks who did not get purchased by Live Nation or AEG. And so there's very few of them. So when you toured, you had a different promoter every night, and they were one of these folks, essentially, I would say 90% of the time, maybe more. But you went from market to market, and everybody had their own way of doing things, and everybody had their own, methodology. Doing a Bill Graham show was very different from doing a Don Fox show, from doing a brass ring show. All these folks were very different. In 1996, SFX bought the business, but wait, I'm digressing. I want to go one more slide. Okay, I'm going to digress here. These are two books that everybody who's watching this should go and get. The Last Mogul, which was about Lew Wasserman, the most powerful man in the entertainment industry. And, with all respect to Irving Azoff, Lew Wasserman was the guy. You should read this. He started out as a big band agent in Chicago and, built the biggest motion picture company in the world, which was MCA, then to be called Universal. An important guy to learn about. And the book Ticketmasters, Lucy, John, have you read this? Oh, dear God, this is good. It's by the two guys who are the editors of Relics magazine. And they talk about how the ticket industry evolved, but really it's about how the concert industry evolved. And people not in the concert industry may find this dry. It was a page turner to me. So I suggest you pick this up. And lastly, these are the two people who changed the concert business. Frank Barcelona from Premier Talent and Tom Ross from CAA. Okay, I'm gonna exit out of screen share. Okay, so originally, all of those individual promoters protected their markets because of Frank Barcelona, because he represented all of the big English bands, and he decided who was going to get what show, and it stuck. And basically, it turned the US concert business into kind of a farm team, right? Frank was not going to sell you a show in San Francisco if you were a Denver promoter. Everybody was protected. Now, in 1996, a guy named Bob Sillerman showed up on the scene. And Bob Sillerman was a guy who was a radio station aggregator, so to speak. Is that about right, Lucy, John? Aggregator, something like that? And he bought a few concert promoters, and he was interested in buying concert promoters who had developed amphitheaters. Because all the amphitheaters you see in the country, with a handful of, city-owned or orchestra-owned exceptions like Blossom, were built by promoters. And back then, back in the late 80s, early 90s, it only cost about $2 million to build an amphitheater because they were built on distressed pieces of land. For example, Shoreline Amphitheater, which we all know about, was like a waste dump. And it had, garbage fires on a regular basis. And it was in the middle of nowhere. Right now, if you're driving backstage to Shoreline, backstage is going to be on your left. If you look on your right, it's Google. I mean, it's an insanely valuable piece of land right now. But Bob Sillerman decided he wanted to buy promoters who had real estate. And he essentially bought all of them, right? And Bob came to the industry and said, I own the promoters, I own the amphitheaters. The talent is going to have to do what I tell them to do. And John, Lucy, I don't know if you were at Polestar that year where he told us the story, and we were horrified, but he was, of course, wrong, because you don't tell talent what to do. Talent is going to decide what they want to do. You know,
you also don't get to tell the radio programmers of these radio stations what they're going to do with their airtime either. And their big misconception was that the promoters were all just going to get all this free radio airtime, because now there was this synergy between the radio folks and the concert promoters because they were the same company, right?
Yes, but not necessarily. The radio stations that they owned were not necessarily the stations that played your artist.
Indeed.
But, you know, he rolled this up and said, you know, we're going to be the most powerful entertainment company in the world. And it didn't work. The agents were freaking out because they thought they were going to get shut out, because why pay an agent when the promoter will just make us an offer? That none of this turned out to be true. What actually ended up happening is Bob Sillerman bought as many promoters as he could. And then he took that entire box of promoters come in a box, bag of promoters, I don't know. Anyway.
Cadre.
And sold it to another radio station conglomerate called Clear Channel, which is a Houston-based company started by the Mays family, M-A-Y-S. And they owned more radio stations and more highway billboards than any company in the country. And they came to the industry and said, we have all the amphitheaters, we have all the promoters, we have all the billboards, we have all the radio stations. You're going to do what we tell you to do. That didn't work either. But what ended up happening is, as you know, everybody's trying to find their sea legs in this new paradigm. Something came to light with the acts, which is that the Mays family and Clear Channel were the largest single donators to the George W. Bush presidential campaign. And a lot of the acts pushed back, and they pushed back really hard. And they said, we're not putting any money into George W. Bush's pocket. So they had to make a decision. What were they going to do? And they did what they thought a responsible company should do. They changed their name. They spun off the concert division and changed their name, and they are now called Live Nation. And so Live Nation is not really a different company than it was. But understanding the history is, I think, critically important. On the other side of the table, you guys know about AEG, and AEG is owned by a Denver billionaire named Phil Anschutz. And it's a privately owned company, and Mr. Anschutz made his money in railroads. I think he owned Union Pacific. I could be wrong on that one. But he also, you know, he's an industrialist. He's an old-time industrialist. And he ended up buying a number of promoters. But I think he did it for good business reasons, because for the most part, AEG is it's a real estate company. They own venues and they want to put talent in their venues. But, you know, AEG has some of the best promoters in the country. I mean, you know, Paul Tillett, John Maglin, right? It's pretty hard to argue with the brilliance of those folks. So in any case, that's a capsule history. Now, there are a number of independent promoters, obviously Lucy, Seth Hurwitz, Jam Productions, Don Fox. I don't know. I'm sure I'm missing a handful. Oh, yes, of course. Another Planet, which was an offshoot from Bill Graham's company. And the markets that were so heavily protected in the early 90s were then no longer protected because the promoters did not have their personal money in it. And so everything changed. Now, we could go into a whole big history lesson about how festivals came to be, but festivals were really not possible. They were very, very difficult before the independents had to give up their market share. Because if you owned a building, you wanted the show in your building. And so, you know, deals started to change once SFX, Clear Channel, Live Nation rolled everything up. And now the deal structures are very, very different. Okay, have I gone off on too many tangents? I'm really good with the tangent thing.
Well, hey, Stuart, I wanted to kind of get back to, can you tell us how did the split deal start as opposed to just flat fees to bands?
You know, I'm under the impression, John, Lucy, help me out with this, so there was Tom Ross who really kind of narrowed down on, here's how much money we're going to want to take out, and here's the formulas that you're going to use. I don't know. John, Lucy, do you remember the beginning of this?
It's so before my time. I don't know, but I put money on it that it was Tom Ross.
Right.
Had to be. Because
And,
he had volume.
There was a competitive nature. And, you know, there's a question that we can all get into, which is what's a fair deal and what's an unfair deal? You know, is an 85-15 fair? Is a 90-10 fair? I mean, these are very complex questions, but every year or every few years, you see those points creeping up or down a little bit. And I argue whether our industry needs to reevaluate what the risk reward factor is, because this is a risk reward factor. I'll tell you a secret, okay? Lucy, John, help me out with this. If you're a tour manager for a small band, I will tell you the secret of how to take away 100% of the net. Okay? Promote it yourself. Okay? You do that, you get 100% of the net, but you are doing all of the work. You're making the venue deals, you're finding out avails, you're talking to agents, you're doing the production, the marketing, the advertising, the cleanup. You do all of that, you take out 100% of the net.
That's
the problem is for the most part, nobody does that.
Nobody wants to take those risks. You know, that's the whole point.
Exactly right.
The promoter takes all the risk, and you know, hope that there is a 15% on the end, and those deals have evolved over the years as it's become more and more competitive in your marketplace. There are more and more promoters fighting for the same acts, and everybody's up in the deal, and then it whittles away at promoter profit, and you know, sometimes we're making pennies.
Yeah, and I, additionally, the work you're doing, it's a service job to the artist as well. You're promoting the artist, you're marketing the artist. It's and so with that, the artist and the representatives, we have to pay. We have to pay, for the work that you do, and at the same time, you're placing a bet on the show, and you're hoping to get a return, and a handsome return on that bet.
Like going to Vegas every day.
That's right.
And listen, I could argue that 15% is not an appropriate profit margin. I worked at AEG. In the LA office, there were probably 200 people. Marketing, accounting, graphic arts, talent buyers, admin people. I mean, it wasn't a small business. And unless you want to do shows for people you don't necessarily want to play for, you want to do them yourself, the business has to support each other. We have to support the promoters, and the promoters have to support us. And to that extent, it should be a pretty simple ecosystem.
I would like to keep the conversation going and pivot over to the spirit of the deal. John, we had talked a lot about the spirit of the deal yesterday. Can you tell us what that means? And for example, John, you contact Lucy to book an artist at her venue. Can you kind of run us through the spirit of the deal?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to Stuart's point, we're all in this together. It's an ecosystem that supports the artist, supports the promoters, and supports the artist representatives and the folks doing the work on behalf of the artist. So when I'm calling up Lucy, there, not only is there years of history with me and Lucy, or me and any promoter that I'm calling, but there is a certain trust factor. And it's multidimensional. It's not only on the deal, the numbers and the line items and all of that, but it's also a holistic trust that when my artist pulls into the Fox Theater in Atlanta and Lucy's running that day, that I'm not getting a phone call. I'm not getting a phone call from my tour manager or from the artist themselves or from management saying, we have a problem today. I know that when my artist pulls up to Lucy's show, that I'm not going to get a phone call. Now, granted, you can't predict everything, and granted, things happen, and granted, reality dictates. So you can't control all factors, but you like to control as many as you can. And we want to eliminate surprises. I don't like surprises. My tour manager doesn't like surprises. My artist certainly doesn't, and the manager absolutely doesn't. So we want to eliminate as many surprises as possible. Granted, there are circumstances. There's weather. There are circumstances beyond our control. But so I know, having known Lucy for many years, having worked together on a ton of shows together, that I can trust Lucy, and that there are going to be many factors that I'm not in Atlanta that day with my client, right? But Lucy is, right? So she's an extension of me, and my artist is an extension of me, and so it's holistic. So we all have to take care of each other, and that's the spirit of the deal. So yes, there's a deal sheet, there's a contract, there's a settlement sheet, there's an audit, there's all of that. But there's so many more factors that are involved in the spirit of the deal, and that's how I approach it, and I think that's how we all approach it.
Let's look at the spirit of the deal, because I find this to be a fascinating dynamic, because settlement to me has to be first and foremost based on the spirit of the deal. Now, I know that tour managers will say, I don't know what the spirit of the deal is, but the fact is that let's take two extremes, but they're not going to be that extreme. John goes into a market and is trying to represent his act and figure out what the best play is. And he gets two different promoters, each bidding up the show. And at a certain point, it gets from, okay, this is a little better than the other guy, to almost an unrealistic level, where you go, wait a minute, our walkout is $20,000 more than the other guys? How is that possible, right? I settled those shows differently. Shows that were booked not necessarily to do the best job they could for the client, but to kill off the competition. I settled those differently. I have a different attitude going in than if Lucy gives us a Monday night with 6 weeks notice where we cannot find a routing date, and she comes to the table and says, you know what, I don't know if this is going to work, but let's try it. I will settle that show differently. And these are crucially important, along with understanding the history between the promoter, the agent, and the act.
I think that's an important point, because why did I do that? I did that because of my relationship with John, because we have years of history, and I'm helping him out because I know down the road when I'm fighting for that deal for that artist and I'm being outbid by a couple grand, that we'll talk about it and I'll say, hey, you know, remember that Monday? And he'll be like, yeah, you did me a solid. And can you meet me in the middle to get as close to that deal as possible? And then maybe I get the show, right? So it's all about the groundwork that we've already laid in those relationships and the trust and the, you know.
I think that's an important point to make. And for people who have been with us from the beginning, we've expressed relationships throughout the entire time that we've had TM 101, that relationships always comes up in the conversation, that this industry is built on foundations of our relationships, and that this is a 360 ecosystem where we all are tied to each other. As big as it is, it's very, very small in a sense that we all know each other. So that's very important note to make. And to segue into kind of the other side, I have a very important question for you, Lucy, but for everyone, can you talk about the flip side of that, what you might go into a deal with a promoter you don't have a great relationship with, and or just don't have a relationship with? Maybe John, you can pick it up, or Stuart, just kind of the other side, looking at the other side of the fence.
John?
Yeah, sure. You know, it's incredibly different. You know, and it's a great question, because to Stuart's point, it's all in the spirit of the deal, in how you're going to settle that show. And if there's some history, and you're forced to deal with a promoter on a deal, because it makes sense for the artist, right? So just as an example, if a promoter has an exclusive on a venue, and that venue is hands down the hot venue in the market, you want to do the right thing for your client and put them in the best possible scenario for them to deliver the most amazing experience to their fans. And with that, it might mean playing that venue. And with that, it might mean dealing with a promoter that you really don't want to deal with, because of any number of factors. And so walking into that settlement, and prior to the settlement, the spirit of that deal, I'm going to tighten those screws on that deal as tight as I can. And I could care less if they make a dime. I could care less if they lose money, because I know that they're making money somewhere where it's a shell game and they're hiding the money somewhere. and they're trying to pull something on me somewhere where I'm not seeing it. So I'm going to tighten the screws on that deal as tight as I can, and I'm going to be the asshole agent because of the history that exists with this promoter. And it's not personal, it's business, but at the same time, to my last point, where my artist is pulling in to that market, I can trust that, in the example of Lucy, that she's going to take care of the artist that she cares, and she cares holistically in the long game. She cares holistically in the relationship game. In all of these things, she gets the big picture. Whereas in the instance of having to deal with a promoter who may not see the big picture, who is in it for the short game, who is in it for for squeezing every amount of money out of this deal in their favor, and could really care less if the artist is happy, if they're not happy, if these are all things that point to the spirit of the deal, right? So that's the flip side to that. And yes, we are all in this together. And I will say that up and down, left and right to this promoter, but they may not get it. So, so if they didn't have the room or the venue, I wouldn't be doing business with this promoter. But you have to, because you want to do the right thing for the artist. It's the right venue to play. The market is used to going there. The venue's hot, all of these things. And so the artist, you want to put them in the best position possible. So that's the flip side to that, in the spirit of that deal.
I feel like we've all had our encounters too, big picture versus little picture. That was a really great point, John. Stuart, I wanted to get this question over to Lucy real quick for timing purposes. Would you like to add to the to your point on the flip side?
No, I mean, I guess I said no, and then I started talking. Perfect. That's me. And if you settled with me, okay. All I have to say is that when you do a deal with a promoter who has kind of forced your hand, if the show didn't do as well as anticipated, and a promoter says, listen, do I really have to give you guys the $500 bus food buyout, or, pick your category? It's like, yes, you do. And I don't want to hear you whining, right? If Lucy says this to me on a date she bailed me out on, it's like, don't worry about it. We're cool. What else is there that we can work on together, right? This is an extremely important dynamic. Anyway, I'm sorry, Lucy, I'm taking your time. I cede my time to Lucy.
Mark, is your question about, like, on my side of the deal, are there agents?
Yeah, so I think it's important to get a perspective on what the spirit of the deal means for you as a promoter.
So again, it goes back to relationships, and that's how you get the shows, is you have to have those relationships with the agents and the managers. There's always going to be that agent that is unkind or is a jerk. And you can decide if you want to do business with them or not, but in most cases you have to. And so it's important to make sure that you do right by the artist, because one day that agent might be gone and that artist is with a different agent and you still want to work with them. But you also have to do right by the agent, because whether you like them or not, or you think the deal is fair or not, they're going to have other artists that you're going to want to work with. So same goes with the promoter John didn't want to work with. There might be an agent that has an artist, may not like the agent, but you want the artist. And so we're all adults, and we have to do the right thing no matter who we're dealing with. So sure, there are a lot of agents that I like more than others, but they put food on my table, so you have to be nice.
It's important that tour managers understand what's going on behind the scenes so we can understand why we are in a city or why we're working with a certain promoter. It's also important to understand the relationships that at play and how they factor the deal. John, what's your advice to a young tour manager and how they can be involved with making sure there are no surprises in settlement once they get on the road?
Yeah, yeah, Jim, that's I love that question because the more communication that exists, I think, between the agent and the tour manager, the better. So if you're a young tour manager and you're up and coming, and how do I get more insight on this deal or on the tour, on the spirit of the deal? I think it's key that there's an open flow of communication with the agent from the earliest moment possible, and develop that rapport with the agent, or at least the my assistant, so you can feel free that to call 10 times a day if you need to get insight, or if you need to get background, or what have you. Don't feel that it's not my place to call, or they're too busy, or any of that. The more we can arm the tour managers, the better. And that goes back to the Mark's point of this being an ecosystem, right? So we all have to work together, and the more that we work together, and the more communication that exists between the agent and the tour manager, the better for the artist, and the better for the deal, and the more ammo you'll have out there on the road to understand the spirit of the deal, right? So if there is that Monday with Lucy, right, and the conversation of a bus buyout, after the show comes up, or bus catering, or any of that, and the show tanks, you understand the spirit of the deal. So I think it's having that holistic picture on each market, each show, each promoter, the relationships involved, understanding the relationships involved, understanding the deal, getting literally as much insight as you possibly can going into the tour, because that's just going to arm you with the insight that you need, so that you can go out there and make friends and make alliances, and seem intelligent out there, and understand deal structures, and all of that, so you can be better at your job. So I would say that, feel free to call 10 times a day. If the agent's too busy, get that rapport with the assistant, but don't feel bashful or shy, or it's not my place, or any of that. It is your place. It is your place. It's your duty, and it's your job and your role to get as much insight as possible. And however we can help you do that, the better for you, the better for the client, better for us, better for everyone. So call.
Yeah, that's great. Lucy, as a promoter, why is it important to you that tour managers understand what is going on in the big picture, and how and why the deal was made?
Super important, because on shows that are underperforming, and I come to you as the tour manager and I say, hey, we've only sold 1,500 out of 4,000 tickets. Can you cut some stuff off your rider? Can we drop the runner today? Do you really need that van? I can pick up a bottle of booze for you on my way in. Things like that. And in turn, I'll cut security. Let's try to cut and save as much as possible, because I'm the one taking all those financial risks. And at the end of the day, the artist is going to get paid regardless. But, I'm working with that 15%, and that's not a lot of money. And in the case of a loss, that could be a big loss. So to understand how the deal works, and understand why I'm asking for these things is really important, because it's a give and take. If you could trim your rider and save $1,000, that's literally $1,000 out of my pocket.
5-1, let's go to you as a tour manager. What is going on in your thoughts about the big picture and knowing the deal, and why is it important that you're in the loop on this?
Well, I think I have a double background, because I worked as a promoter rep also. So one of the things that I learned, and this was something I learned, actually, I'm going to give Lucy mad props in this, because when I was a promoter rep working under Lucy, I saw the things that Lucy would do if we had shows that came in that weren't selling, that, just to piggyback off what she said. And that was really enlightening for me to see. And when I started becoming more of a tour manager slash tour accountant, I could understand why she was doing those things. And so when I had a show that was coming to, like, let's say Los Angeles, and it was a bloodbath for the promoter, and I knew it was going to be a bloodbath. So I would take it upon myself and say, hey, we are going to cut this, we are going to cut back on this. And, I would talk to my production coordinator, my road manager, my production manager, and say, hey, can we cut back on some of the stage hands? Can we cut back on staging this or that? And, one of the things I had always learned is small things make big things. So if you're like constantly cutting small things, in the bigger picture for the promoter, you're actually saving them money. So I think that for me, that was a huge learning lesson that I learned from Lucy. So not to blow smoke up you, Lucy, I want to thank you for teaching me that, because I really observed that. And when I go into settlements now, I am very detail oriented when I do settlements and figuring out things of where we can save money, not only for the artist, but also for the agent and the promoter rep.
That makes me feel really good.
Lucy, in our first episode on settlement, we walked through the processes on the tour management side, the practical processes of settlement, and those don't change from a club up to arena in macro terms. They're the same things, just on a bigger scale and with a lot more line items. But what I think would be really useful for people to understand is the promoter side of settlement on the day of show. What you're doing while the day is going along to compile your settlement and put it in front of the tour manager.
Okay. So obviously we're all tracking sales as the show progresses. And so day of show, probably the first thing that I do is pull up an audit, see where we are, and give you an update. If the show is sold out, then I probably would have already sent you a pre-settlement so that you can go over everything, and we're sort of going back and forth with questions ahead of time. But if it's not sold out, I'm tracking the numbers. I'm talking to you about holds and kills, and is there anything that we can open up and release? It's good to be ahead of that because people buy tickets last minute and you want to be able to have tickets available. I'm asking my marketing department to send me an ad pack. I'm double checking that. I'm talking to my production manager and seeing what our labor bill is. I'm making sure that your production manager is on track with mine and we're aligned on how much labor we have. Making sure we're cutting so that we're not going into overtime. And then I'm just plugging in the numbers as I'm getting the invoices all day long. And hopefully by 2 or 3 in the afternoon, you've got a pre-settlement. You've got a few hours to review it before the end of the night, and then we can sit down and not really have any major issues to talk about.
Right. So you're maintaining a constant dialogue with the tour manager, the production manager, the house, all of the parties that are going to, you're compiling your costs from your side, from the venue side, from everything that's going to come into and you're going to hand the tour manager a nice, neat little package at the end of the night with everything detailed out and ad packs and everything, so that I sit down, pull it out and go through it all in detail. And it's, when it's presented in a clear and concise way like that, it makes your job as the tour manager so much easier. You can just go through, and I wanted to ask you as well, if there's anything that really, from the tour manager's side, that really bugs you when you're doing a settlement, or something that really stands out as going like an extra mile. Sorry, I'm springing this question on you, but it just kind of came to me there. If there's anything while you're settling that really is a bugbear of yours from the tour manager, and equally something that is a great surprise to see.
So something that really bugs me is when a tour manager comes in with an attitude, like ready to fight something, no matter how small, really unnecessarily. It's almost like a posturing that's irritating and unnecessary. So we really should be working together. So I'm happy, like I actually enjoy going through settlement line item by line item and talking about why it is what it is and if it was under or over budget. I appreciate that. But to come in guns blazing like, you know, I'm going to get one over on her, A, usually doesn't work, and B, is just a bad way to do business. I feel like we can work through things, and it's not the time to renegotiate the deal. Things that surprise me, tour managers that just come in and don't look over any of your invoices and just sign the settlement sheet, take their check and walk out. Well, that's a disservice to your agent and your artist, because what if I had a sell wrong, or, you know, I was over or under significantly and you didn't even ask. So I think there's a happy medium there. Don't come in as a bully, but don't be lazy at your job, I guess.
That's a really great point to bring up, Lucy. There are so many different sort of variables in the day, and a lot of tour managers feel like settlement is their time to shine. It's their time to wield a heavy hammer for their client. And the God of Thunder comes in and you hack and you slash. And that isn't necessarily a great way to do business. We have talked about, now again, this is literally the third time we've talked about settlement. We spoke at Settlement 101, where we gave you the basics of a club and, you know, probably smaller theater tour. Then we brought in the heavy guns, and we had Judd White and Matt Schneider come in and literally go cell by cell about show settlement. This deeper dive talks about the etiquette and demeanor of the spirit of the deal. How is that deal done? How do all of the parts come together? You've got your promoter, you've got your agent, and you've got you out there. You want to come with all of your knowledge, but not with a big hammer, because it might not be necessary. Those kinks should be worked out beforehand so that you're not battling. And there was a time back in the renegade days where the tour manager showed up and put their gun down on the table, and they started counting cash, and you fought about shit.
Yeah.
These days, we don't really have to do that anymore. You know what I mean? We're a far more civilized and technology related business. We get our deal sheets in advance. So, you know, we don't want to walk in with our guns blazing, because we want to have a good day, and we don't want it all to go to hell in a handbasket at 9 o'clock at night when your act is on deck.
And we also realize that this is a small business. I mean, we're going to see each other again.
Right.
So if it's so unpleasant the first few times, you know,
right.
And we don't want to call John at 11 o'clock at night and, you know, have an issue over a runner van or something.
Right. There, you know, and all of these things are there. If there are going to be strange things in the settlement, you're going to know about in advance. Most of the things that you're going to be getting in your show settlement. Now, again, there's, you know, two ways that we're going to look at this for a second. You may have a promoter rep on your single promoter tour, whether it's a fabulous guy like John Merritt from AEG or a fabulous guy like Matt Schneider from Live Nation. You're doing it's Groundhog Day, and we talked about that last week. You're doing it every day. On the chance that there are individual promoters or some other promoters on your show, you know, you want to work out a few things before you go in. Stuart, can you really quick for us, as we're moving into this last bit, how, you know, what would you say to a younger tour manager about their settlement etiquette for the day? Give me a couple of pointers from Stuart, and I'm going to come and I'm going to actually get this, you know, Lucy, as a promoter, what do you have to contribute to that question? And John as well, as we move forward.
Well, I would say the first thing is, you know, we've talked about a lot about the spirit of the deal. And John, you can probably remember during Lollapalooza tour days where I would go into Don Muller's office, and whoever his assistant was had to literally copy every piece of correspondence. Back then it was fax more than email, and put it in my show file chronologically. because if I wanted to understand how we got there, when we got to, and these were very complicated settlements, I wanted to see it in writing, you know, and I would do that, you know, I mean, with some of my clients now, you know, I have full access to the emails, but it's a matter of just be prepared. It's not that complicated.
Right.
You take the settlement sheet, you take the offer sheet, you put it in the settlement sheet as a placeholder, you put in the gross. You can figure out very quickly how close you are to a break even, or if there's, and then I'll call the promoter and say, hey, is there anything about the show I should know? Anything weird? Okay, cool. I'll see you tomorrow. And I'll know going in whether it's going to be a long day or an easy day.
Right.
And unless it's an outlier situation where I think that there is really going to be some sort of a battle going on, there's not much to it. It's not that complicated. And in my own head, I have to look at the deal and figure out what is there that doesn't seem right. Is there any point that I should be fighting about? Because you have to look at it in the whole picture. How much of the percentage of gross, which is estimated expenses divided by the box office, do I think I'm going to take out? Am I if I'm going to take out a higher percentage in a particular venue than I do in most venues, am I really going to fight about FedEx charges? You know, one size doesn't fit all. Everybody has a different way of factoring in their expenses. You can go into a venue where the rent is low, but the side costs are high. Or it could be the other way around. You just have to, you know, you're representing your acts and the shareholders of your act, which are, of course, the agent, manager, and business manager, which comprise typically around 30% profit share. You know, how are you best going to represent everybody? And if you're going to be a jerk, you are representing your act improperly, because there's a possibility that a promoter's, John's going to go back and say, hey, I need another date for so-and-so. And a talent buyer could say, I'm sorry, man. Life's too short. But I'll end this thought with the famous Don Muller, right? I mean, some of you know him. John worked with him for many years. Lucy knows him. Muller said to me a long time ago, he said, deals are like balloons. If you squeeze them in one place, they just get bigger somewhere else. And that's true.
Hey, Stuart, before we move on to Lucy's take, you said something yesterday that while we were talking that I think we should say again to young tour managers, and that is you could see a promoter rep 4 times in 1 year with different clients, because we may have 3 to 4 clients a year. We may do a couple of different tours in a year. You may think you're going to wield a big hammer for this one client that you have, which may be setting markets on fire. But when you show back up with a client that might be in a winter period of their current situation and it isn't as healthy, and you have been a monster previously, but now you might need a little grace from someone, could be a thing. Could be a thing.
You're right. And you know, that $500 bus buyout, for some acts, it's gravy. For some acts, that's what they're going to live on.
That's right. Lucy, over to you to talk with us, and specifically to our up and comers, about not just the spirit of the deal, but the spirit of settlement.
Wow, that Muller quote kind of That was just, yeah, believe me.
I had the whole visual. I'm like, wow.
Me too.
I wish I had a balloon here that I could.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I am a big Don Mueller fan, so that I could hear his voice. So I think if I send you a pre-settlement and you see something on there that you don't understand or that looks iffy to you, then let's talk about it. Don't come in my office at 11 o'clock at night in a hurry and pressing to get that removed from settlement, because it's just not going to happen. We're going to have to call John or whoever your agent is and say, sorry to bother you. But be prepared, like look at your deal sheets. If I have something on my settlement that doesn't align with what's on your deal sheet, bring it up. Let's talk about it. We're human. I might have something wrong. Your deal sheet might not be updated. We might have tweaked the deal in the last month, who knows? But just be aligned with your promoter, because sometimes you need them, sometimes you don't, but we're all in this together. It is an ecosystem and we deserve to make money too. We're taking all the risk, and just kind of remember that when you're sitting down to try to take all the money.
This is a touch point that we have touched on previously throughout the 101 and the 2.0 series, is that you're talking about relationships. You're going to see these people over and over. John, as an agent, and again, this is another touch point. We talked about your agent. You know, if you are looking at something and it doesn't look right, call your agent and ask them to have a look at this anomaly in the deal, because it is not your place to come in and redo a deal because you, for whatever reason, feel like that's the thing. You know, if you've got an issue with the deal, please call your agent and ask them. And to Mariah's point, make sure you've got the current deal sheet.
You know, can we talk about deal sheets for a second?
Yeah, I want John to answer that real
I'm
quick,
sorry.
and then we're going to come back to you, Stu. Go, John. From your standpoint, coaching a newer TM.
Yeah. So it goes both ways, I would say. And I'm not going to shed any new light on this that Stuart and Lucy haven't already mentioned, but what I would add to is in the reality of things on the ground happening in real time. Shit happens. Stagehands might be more than what the deal sheet is saying because the production changed 2 weeks out, and that the advance happened close to the show, and it's all happening sort of on the fly. So stagehands goes up. And so what I would say to a new tour manager is before any approvals of any significant costs are approved at settlement, to call the agent. And in that regard, it's the flip side of it's not going into a promoter's office redoing a settlement and redoing a deal. Things happen on the fly because reality happens, and production, the artist wants a different production now, a different look. Things happen, right? And so with that, I would just underline the point of just communication with the agent, and it's also the agent's responsibility to be in communication with the tour manager as well. So it's on us as well. And I'll leave the last point on this subject with I need Lucy. I need my tour manager. I need management. The tour manager needs me. The tour manager needs Lucy. We all need each other in this, and we've all spoken about it. But it can't be spoken about enough in that we're not able to do our jobs to the best of our abilities alone in a silo. I need Lucy to do my job great. I need my tour manager to do my job great. I need I need everyone to do my job great and great communication with everyone. And if that happens, then the artist benefits, everyone benefits. Lucy's going to benefit, the tour manager is going to benefit, the artist is going to walk out with more money. Everyone benefits because of it. But walking in, bull in a china shop, any of that, it just won't last.
Right.
because you'll be squeezed out at some point, and no one will want to work with you. No one will want to put in the time. No one will give you that recommendation. But if you handle things in a way that's professional, then you'll rise in this business, and the relationships will flourish, and your clients will be better because of it, and you'll be better because of it. So, I would just leave it at that.
Okay, great. And the other thing I wanted to just mention as I was listening to Lucy chat, sometimes, listen, sometimes somebody's formulas in a spreadsheet could be broken, and you can somehow spend 30 minutes trying to come to the same numbers, and it isn't what the numbers that you're putting in. The reason you can't get there together is now you have to start looking at broken cells. So in these moments where your head's about to fly off, just remain calm and cool and work with the people that you're working with to find where the anomaly is. Mary Jo, you wanted to add something to this.
Yeah, going along with this, I think it's really important for younger tour managers, particularly women, knowledge is power and communication is power. And I think it's better now, but when I first started, I was very fortunate in the first few shows that I ever settled on my first tour as a tour manager, were with women. So I didn't feel quite as intimidated, and they were also very, very nurturing, really coached me through. But when I got to some promoters that were a little more old school, pretty intimidating, guy club promoters, I think what stood me really well was, I took it upon myself to learn everything. And by that point, having done a few settlements, learning everything about that deal. Like, I walked in knowing everything, because I just felt like if they could catch me out, they were going to walk all over me. And so that was my armor, that was my way of, and really at that point in time, it was just really like literally my armor. But, to walk in and know the deal so well that they couldn't walk all over me, and not be a jerk. It wasn't even going to really be in my nature to walk in and bull into the china shop, because I was this like young girl, with some big old club promoter. So, but that really helped me hold my own. And then, as I progressed without even knowing it, that, that just made me look really professional. And actually some of those promoters I was really intimidated by early on, I ended up having great relationships with, and they ended up stepping up into, like working with major promoters, or, moving out of their club or becoming part of a major conglomerate. And we had a great relationship. So I think that understanding the big picture, and learning everything you can about it and communicating with your team is so important on that tip, especially if you're somebody who's, a woman or really young, or really tiny, it's like, in a way that somebody who's unscrupulous might try to walk all over you. Knowledge is power.
Knowledge is power.
Yeah.
Dave Oken had a great point in the chat. For those that are not able to read it, many times the deal is put together way before production is figured out, or a rider is generated and tweaked, and that will impact the variable costs across the board. During the advance, though, it's always important to bring up any added costs that may not exist to make sure things are ironed out between the show costs or any potential chargebacks. Back to no surprises, just talk about it. If production and the agent and the promoter and everybody stays on the same page, it's not going to be a surprise party. They're going to be a surprise party every day anyway. It's what we do. But again, hearkening back to, we want to achieve Groundhog Day. We just want it all to go quite smoothly. Is that Charlie Hernandez in the room who just mentioned Frank Barcelona and the 8515? Stuart, I think that was a confirmation.
Charlie is in the room. Charlie is in the room.
Charlie Hernandez is in the room, ladies and gentlemen. We love you, Charlie. It's great to see you. Thanks for joining. Jim, is your hand up? I agree with all
of these points.
Jim, is your hand up to break in or wave?
Oh, you can break in. Far be it from me to tell Charlie that we'll be with you in a moment. That doesn't work. I think in 2021, which is when we're all assuming we're going to start working again, you know, the offers are going to drive the production. I don't think the production's going to drive the offers. And that means that the offers are going to come in before the rider is done, because a smart band is not going to decide their production levels until they know how much money they're going to be able to bring in, which means that promoters are going to be guessing as to what the expense levels are going to be, and they may be wrong. So I think it's important to keep that in mind.
They're probably going to be wrong.
Right?
Sorry, I said it.
Way wrong. The second thing, and John, I want to ask you about this, is deal sheets versus offers. So an offer comes in. Lucy sends you an offer for the Fox Theater. Your assistant takes that offer and puts it into an ICM spreadsheet that has similar but not exact categories. So when that offer sheet, when that deal sheet comes to the tour manager, it may be accurate mathematically, but not accurate in line item description. So I would suggest that, listen, we're talking about, go back to the first conversation with the promoter. It's like, you may not be able to do that, but you are always able to ask for the offer as a tour manager and have it as the backup for your settlement.
Absolutely. In addition to the deal sheet and the contract, it's imperative the tour manager has a copy of the promoter offer. And Stuart, to your point, to the Lollapalooza tour files, you know, you need that insight. The more information that you had, the better, because you needed to understand holistically what went into the deal in as much as you can. And it's imperative that each tour manager gets a copy from the agent, a copy of the promoter offer, and each attached promoter offer revision that leads up to that deal sheet, which then leads up to the contract. Because really what that is a timeline of correspondence leading up to the show. And so if the tour manager can have all of that in writing in a show file at your disposal, especially at settlement, you'll understand more of what the spirit of that deal is. And the more insight you have at settlement that day, the better for you, the better for everyone.
Yeah, I agree.
So guys, out there in the chat in the world, are there any questions that we can toss up to our panelists now that we've covered everything we're meant to cover? This is the moment. If you have any, now would be the time. I'm going to scroll through and see if there's, Elise, did you get your question answered? I think. Let's see. Yes, thanks, she said. All right. Questions in 3, 2, 1. I think we're good today. We want to thank all of our esteemed
very
panelists
concise today.
Thank you guys for joining us, Stuart, Lucy, and John. It was a pleasure to have you, and always to my colleagues. It's wonderful to see you all.
Yes.
We're going to do the Zoom wave out. Thanks to everyone who joined us today and continues to come back and share information. We appreciate you.
Everyone have a great week. Stuart, John, Lucy, thanks for joining us today. Such an incredible learning experience to listen to everyone just hit this topic.
I feel like we've done a full 360 on settlement.
Next week will be webinar number 60. We will be diving into Master Tour. So hope you're as excited for that as we are, and we'll see you next week, and everyone have a wonderful weekend and week. We'll see you soon.